Here.
Paul Govan here, and Dan Orsby absent. Number 3 is short-term rental ordinance proposal.
If Luke is out sick today, but can participate via speakerphone, so he can explain what this is about and why he's brought it to the committee, if you are okay with me giving him a call. And
100%.
okay. Hi Luke, this is Susan. We're in the committee meeting. I'm going to put you on speakerphone, okay? So you can explain this proposal. Hold on. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Can everyone hear him?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Sorry I couldn't be there. Have you all had a chance to read through this at all, or?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Do you want me to go through it line by line, or would you just rather just ask questions, or how would you like to go?
What do you want?
I think just really anything that would be the more important aspects of it would be great.
Okay. So right now what we do, if somebody has a short-term rental, they're required to get a permit. Right now we call it recreational lodging, but we're going to change that to short-term rental, well, if you approve it. And right now I do an inspection prior to issuing the recreational lodging permit, and then there's no follow-up inspections or license renewals or anything like that. And there are a large amount of short-term rentals that don't have lodging permits, and it's like an endless chase trying to track them all down. So one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this is not only make sure that the short-term rentals that are out there are being done in a proper way, and by that I mean connected to a proper septic system that's sized appropriately rather than just people pooping in buckets.
Main experience.
Yeah.
The other is that, you know, that there's proper life safety features in the short-term rental, so that they have the proper smoke detectors and life safety fire extinguishers, you know, handrails, whatever it be. So right now there are short-term rentals that are just storage sheds. Right down by the water or whatever, they put a chemical toilet in it or that kind of thing, throw some curtains up over the windows and call it a short-term rental and start renting it. But the other problem we have is that these short-term rentals are eliminating a lot of the long-term rental apartments. And what that's doing is that the remaining apartments, the rents are going through the roof. And all you gotta do is look online, look on Facebook, and you'll see people begging for a place to stay all over the place. So part of this is, if you'll see that there's a difference between owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied. What that does is, if it's non-owner occupied, the way I have it written now is it limits, so if you've got 2 or 3 units, you can only rent one of them as short-term rental. The other 2 have to be either long-term rental or whatever else you want to do with them. If it's owner-occupied, that ratio changes to where you could rent up to 2/3 of your units. So if you had 3 units, you could rent 2 of them as short-term rentals, assuming you're living in the third. There's multiple reasons for that. attendant chaos or whatever. So owner occupied is deemed as a little bit safer and better. I've got it in here that they have annual inspections and an annual license, similar to the way motels and hotels are. They have to have annual inspections and annual license. I have in here that they're prohibited from getting a license if they've got existing code violations going on. So if they've got, you know, a big mess in their yard or whatever, property maintenance violations or that kind of thing, then that would exempt them from being able to get a license until they get those things fixed.
Perfect.
I also put in that we wouldn't allow accessory buildings, recreational vehicles, tents, trailers, yurts, that kind of thing. Anything that's not has an occupancy permit for a full-time dwelling, meaning it has cooking capabilities, it has running water, connected to a proper septic system, those kinds of things can't be a short-term rental. We have 2 or 3 in town where they literally put their pop-up camper up and start renting it on Airbnb, and you know, I find out about it. I ask them, where's the waste going? And they say that they take the camper somewhere and have it pumped, but there's no document trail for that. It's kind of a mess.
When you hit the Airbnbs, you answered my question that this kind of has to do with Airbnbs, I would guess.
Airbnb, Vrbo, and there's many other websites. They all are just names for short-term rentals. So it's similar to calling a tissue or Kleenex, or calling a photocopier a Xerox machine. A short-term rental is Airbnb, Vrbo,
Sure.
any of those kinds of things.
Perfect.
It could also be just rented in Uncle Henry. I mean, some people do that as well, or Craigslist. Not everybody uses those other websites, but this covers the whole gamut. If it's rented for less than 30 days, then it's a short-term rental.
Perfect.
I have in there. Well, go ahead.
Luke, I think you've explained.
I just had a couple things to add.
Okay.
Luke, with cooking capabilities, does that mean somebody, if they have a room with a bathroom, that's not gonna suffice? You know, if you're renting out a suite as opposed to something with cooking, it would be no different than a hotel room. And just
Well, in
for,
order to be considered a dwelling, you have to have cooking facilities. I think
Okay.
if we look at the definition in the bottom of this,
okay,
I think it has, dwelling unit is a room or group of rooms designed and equipped exclusively for use as a living quarters or a one family, including provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and eating. It doesn't necessarily have to have an oven, but it has to have cooking facilities. So it would be the same type of thing that we would issue an occupancy permit for somebody to rent as an apartment or whatnot.
If someone had a boarding house, that could have shared kitchen facilities and bath facilities and bedrooms, is that correct? Something along those?
Correct, and that is listed in here as an exemption, same as motels, hotels. Boarding houses is one of the things that's exempted from the short-term rental, because those are permitted in a different way. You know, we have some shelters in town that Home Co-op operates that are kind of boarding houses. They have shared kitchens, shared bathrooms, but those are managed in a different way.
But campers would be allowed if they were set up properly, correct?
no, because they wouldn't fall under dwelling.
Yeah,
It has to
but how
be a
does a
dwelling unit,
campground get
and
away with
campers aren't allowed to
seasonal
be a
rentals?
full-time dwelling unit.
They're not allowed to be a full-time.
So this won't affect any seasonal stuff for any anything like campground, or I'm trying to think of where.
But they'd be
No,
under their
not
own.
campground, that's a totally separate thing.
It's not going to affect
But this
anybody's
would
recreation.
exempt somebody from just, they've got a camp on a lake and they want to set up a camper next to the camp and rent that as an Airbnb. That's not going to happen because it's not set up for that.
What if that camper's hooked into a well and a septic?
It's not his dwelling.
But how is it not a dwelling?
In theory, you could do that, but you have to make sure that the septic system was sized appropriately for that, and it's pretty rare that the system was put in big enough for the camp and and an additional RV or whatnot.
Well, I really think, Luke, the provision around insurance is what's really gonna get, those doing it really part-time, they're gonna back away, because that's probably gonna be prohibitive, because you have a homeowner's policy, and now you're gonna look at a short-term rental policy, which I believe is getting a lot more scrutiny than it used to. One other question I had, Luke, as far as owner-occupant, I mean, if you're running a business in the building, that's not construed as owner-occupant, because you could, in theory, be around as much as somebody who was owner-occupant and gone for the winter.
And again, this is it's a living document, so we can make changes. I kind of look at it as like a business is likely to not be there on the weekends, which is the most prominent time for these to be rented. That's not always the case, but that's kind of how I looked at it. And the requirements for proving that you're owner occupied is showing that you are using that as your residence, and let's see, evidencing ownership, or ownership would be fine.
It is occupied.
The gray area, I could do it either way. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I looked at a lot of other towns, and I cherry-picked the things I thought were the best, and then I kind of wrote it around those things. But a lot of this language was not something I came up with from scratch. It was stuff that I stole from other towns that had things I really liked, and there was stuff I left out that I didn't like. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You're right, Luke, because that definition does say, and is occupied by the owner when any part of the dwelling unit is rented. So you could take that a couple of different directions, but what you mentioned a moment ago is the business would have to, for example, the business would have to be operated 7 days a week,
correct.
theoretically,
Right.
just as I think it through, that's all.
Or at least
Most
the
of
days that it's
places
rented.
that I'm aware of currently that have an Airbnb above their business, they only have the one unit. So I know like Fort Knox Law, they have 2 units above them, but they only use one of them for Airbnb. So the other one is they use it for office staff and that kind of thing. But then there's one above the law firm. I can't think of it at the moment, but there's one above the law firm there on Main Street, and then of course there's one above Mark's business. I'm not sure how many others are above businesses, but those are the 3 that come to mind. And so I don't know that it would have a huge impact on any of them, since they only rent one out anyways, other than the fees a little bit more because it's not owner occupied.
Yeah, okay. And, I mean, if we move this forward, will you notify those that have them, so we can at least get some input before we?
I certainly will. So I've been telling the people that this was probably coming. If they received a permit this current calendar year, I've been telling them that this was on the horizon. And I put an exemption in here for those people that they are good until the end of this year, because I just inspected them. I just gave them a permit, and it's not fair to make them come back and do it all over again. So I figured those people could wait till next year. But there's other folks like yourself, Mark, that I haven't actually even been in your apartment to inspect it. So
Your
there's a bunch
predecessor
out there.
was.
I'm going to have to send out letters and say, hey, this is the new policy. This is what I need to do.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot the first year for me, but I think it's important.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like the fees are unreasonable. I mean, that's gonna be some amount of time that, 1 or 2 or 3 people are gonna have to spend in a unit, and that's not excessive.
Correct. And one of the things I'm planning to do, in fact, I've downloaded a few from other towns. I'm going to have the to be aware of that we're gonna be looking for. So hopefully we can eliminate the need for inspection because they didn't have things right. Hopefully they can get it all done before I ever show up, and they'll be ready to go. That's the hope anyways.
Okay.
Perfect, Luke. Any more questions for Luke? Can we let him go rest?
Well, the fees ordinance update and the Appendix K are all related to this. They're all,
Correct.
those other two
Right.
items are what have to be updated if you decide to go forward with this. Those would have to,
In just essentially, we would add, if I can scroll down through,
It's the last two.
fees are on the last page, right? Yeah,
Last two, yep.
last two. So I'm assuming that the $50 fee is already there. Or are these all new fees?
I think they're all new. I don't think there was a fee for getting a license.
Right now for recreational lodging, we just charge the minimum permit fee, which is $35.
Okay.
And the other thing is the current ordinance, if you look at the allowed uses, that little chart that's on there from Schedule K,
Yeah.
everything said L2 next to it, that where it was allowed, which was a planning board review. That's what L2 means, and that has never been done, and to the best of my knowledge, I couldn't find any evidence that it was being done before me either.
Mhm.
So they've always just been given out by the code officer. I changed that to L1 so that it would just be my review, and then obviously if I had concerns, I'd involve the fire department, that kind of thing. But I don't expect the fire. I told Chris and Pam I don't expect them to come on all the inspections, but if they want to tag along, they're certainly welcome.
If I could add my 2 cents to that real quick, as time goes on, I think there's goals of public safety doing pre-plans for a lot of the buildings in town. That's been a goal for a long time, and that type of structure or that type of occupancy could be really important to that pre-planning process. So if that's something you could talk to Mike about, that'd be good.
Yep.
and
Mike reviewed the ordinance. I don't know if he's in the room because I can't see, but Mike reviewed the ordinance. He had concern about the smoke detectors. He wanted to know if they needed to be hardwired or 10-year tamper-resistant battery. I talked with Chris about that. Chris pointed out some things in the law that the legislature's passed where rentals do have to have one of those two options. And really, it's not too obtrusive. If it's an existing building and they don't want to go through the expense and the hassle of hardwiring it, those 10-year battery units are very easy to just plop right up on the ceiling and they're good to go for 10 years. So it's not a huge burden on the property owner, but it does make a difference. You know, the renter can't just pop the 9-volt battery out and then start smoking or doing whatever.
You said it right, smoking. Perfect.
So I'll be adding that, is what I was saying, because that was something Mike pointed out. I haven't received many other review comments. If this goes forward tonight, then I'll post it on the website so that the public can start looking it over and have a chance to see it before I know. I know there's going to be revolt, but I still think it's needed. But I'm willing to listen if they have suggestions or concerns about certain aspects of it or whatnot. But I do think it's only fair to put it out there so everybody can read through it and know what the thing says before they come to the public hearing at the next meeting, if you push it forward.
You know, me looking at it, I think it's a great idea. I think it's minimal fees, really. 300. Worst case, you're paying $350.
Yep.
One night rental in an Airbnb at some places, depending on time of year, and it's a safety.
No, I agree.
Truly, safety's. We don't want. God forbid if someone did put them out in a shack. And, I just don't. I think it's good to have those in place.
it also allows public safety to know where they are in
Right.
terms of response, both police and fire. And this proposal doesn't do what some communities have done, which is attempt to limit
Yeah.
and say people can't do. What this says is, you can do it, but these are the rules.
Yeah.
And all of them are pretty much geared around public safety. You know, the inspections and the requirements for appropriate septic and water and that kind of thing.
So things that, humane things that should be,
Need to be in place.
need to be in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to move it forward to the council.
Dan, you want a second? Oh, second. All in favor? Opposed? Number 6,
Is that a motion to adjourn?
second. All in favor? Opposed? Dan.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks,
All right.
Lou.